Hello. Oh, pardon me. Hello, everybody. Mark Hoffman here on Whiskey Whistle with a very special little live stream. We have a special guest today, and I'll invite him in a couple of minutes. He is ready at the go. Thanks a lot, Bill, for popping in, and I'll bring you on in about 2 or 3 minutes. So we have a really special event today, and this is featuring 40 Creek, which is, I guess, arguably a top 5 Canadian whiskey that came out not too long ago. So it's I think it's got about a 20-something odd year history. Bill will tell us a little bit more about the history of 40 Creek and what he does there, and then we'll also be trying some very special whiskeys together. And I hope wherever you are, you're having a great afternoon or evening or morning, and hopefully you'll be able to try some of these products wherever you are. In Canada, for sure, you can get the Master's Cut, and I know that's coming to Manitoba this next month, actually. So watch for that one. The Foxheart is already currently available, and the standards, the basics, I shouldn't call them basic, the Barrel Select, the Copper Pot, which I really, really enjoy. And this is one I haven't tried yet. This is the small batch double barrel reserve. So those are, of course, available, I think, pretty much all over Canada. So anyway, thank you so much for coming, and we have Whiskey Straight Al who's popped in to say hi. Thanks for coming along, and let's go ahead and bring in our guest, Bill Ashburn. He is the master blender for 40 Creek, and I think he's also got quite a lot of experience overall in the whiskey industry. Again, we'll hear from him as we get started here. We have Graham Young who's jumped in. Thanks for popping in, and also Greg over in France. We're really happy to see him. Okay, so Bill, if you're ready to go, I'll bring you on in. Let's get started. Hello,
hey,
Bill.
Mark.
Welcome to Whiskey Whistle. Really nice to meet you, and thrilled to have you on the channel. And if I don't know if you have anybody working there with your live stream or your sound, but if it's possible to turn down the volume, that might be good, if possible. So anyway, how's the sound for everybody watching? Hopefully everything sounds great over there. We've got a little bit of background noise over at Bill's office. I think that's because you are at the distillery. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, cool. Okay, well, that sounds pretty good. And we also have Dave Gardner. I'm not sure if you know the Two Brewers, Yukon Brewing, Yukon Spirits rep from Alberta. Really happy to have you along, Dave. Anyway, now, before we get into any of the tastings, now, I guess what I should do, though, just to keep things moving along, I think we should maybe start with the Barrel Select. Would that be a good assumption?
Probably a very good one to start with.
All right. So, Bill, I don't know if you have some there or if you're allowed to. I think you are. That's your job. Your job
That's kind of my job. You're kind of getting a little bit of a glimpse of my office of the stuff that's in here. But I don't think that's one of the things I have in here.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try this out myself for the first time. I've never had the Barrel Select. And I should also mention to my viewers that everything that you're seeing in front of me was all provided by 40 Creek to Whiskey Whistle, to my channel. So a big thanks to them. And in the spirit of what's the word? Information, of declaration, just so that you know that this stream was made possible with 40 Creek and the fine people over there. Anyway, so I've got the what is it called again? The Barrel Select. And I think relatively, they're all roughly about the same kind of a medium amber hue. And Bill, I want to ask you, I think I hear some bottles clanging. Are you right by the bottling run?
Just give me a second. I'm going to get up and I'm going to shut my office door, and maybe that will calm it down a little bit.
Sounds good. Not that we mind the noise. It's a distillery for one. Okay, so that's the Barrel Select, and I would say really classic Canadian whiskey style. And what I've come to notice about 40 Creek is a certain nuttiness that I don't get from other Canadian whiskeys, and hopefully Bill will back me up on that one. But Anyway, Bill, before we get into the tasting, first of all, a big cheers to you for coming on Whiskey Whistle and providing some great information for people in Manitoba, people all over Canada, and also my viewership all around the world. So a big thanks for coming aboard here.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm actually really glad that you started with the Barrel Select. Barrel Select was launched 21 years ago and still continually places in medals in whiskey competitions every time we enter it. It's a brand or a blend that has proven to be very true to the 40 Creek brand. We've been consistent with it for 21 years, and consumers love it and gravitate to it.
And like I say, I think it's really clear that we've got a classic style of Canadian whiskey. However, and again, I'm not sure if you heard me a moment ago, but there's a certain nuttiness to 40 Creek, and you really do get a sense of that. Of course, not as much as some of the other products that we'll try, but you get that little bit of nuttiness, which is very unique. Can you tell me where that might come from?
So we worked a long time on developing that initial blend, and the proportions of the different grains that go into it, we've held true to. And we've been able to maintain that nuttiness that you're describing. I won't go into the exact formulation, but that is a characteristic of that particular blend and its sister blend, Copper Pot, and we maintain that. It's our style.
Anyway, it's really quite, I don't want to say it's light, but it's flavorful, it's crisp. Some of the hallmarks of Canadian whiskey, that crispness. I think there's a little bit of rye involved there. Would there be? Yep. And then just this really enveloping a little bit of nuttiness, which really adds to the complexity, which is great. But anyway, without getting ahead of ourselves here, could you please share with the viewership here and with the community, first of all, who you are and where you work, and a little bit about what you do and your tenure in the whiskey industry.
Sure. So I'm Bill Ashburn. I'm the master blender at 40 Creek. I'm now full-time in that role as of July 1st of this year. I was walking a tightrope being head of supply chain and master blender for a number of years. I'm now fully dedicated to the master blender role. My background, I've actually been in this building for 34 years. I started here well before 40 Creek was thought of. I started when it was a very small distillery called Reeder Distillery, owned by a gentleman named Mr. Otto Reeder. I was here when John Hall came aboard in 1992. We worked really closely together to develop the lines of whiskeys, the first two that we launched in the year 2000. I have to be careful because we developed them in 99, but we didn't launch till 2000. Sometimes I get that confused in my head. So we're a very young company with very old roots, is the easiest way to put it. Reeder Distillery was established in 1972. I had the pleasure of working for both Mr. Reeder and John, and I was able to learn a lot from both of them. I've actually been in the alcoholic beverage industry for 41 years now. I started
That's really
out in
impressive.
It's a long time, and it doesn't feel that long. I started out in the wine industry until I jumped over to distilled spirits. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And we're having a nutty nutshelly of a whiskey here too, which is great. Now, just for people that are watching, a lot of people get into whiskey and all of a sudden they think, you know what? I think I can make whiskey. And how do I become, a blender? What would your biggest piece of advice be for people that are so into whiskey that they really want to get into the production side and possibly doing something like what you do?
Well, first of all, you need to have an extremely good palate. That is by far one of the most important things. The other thing is you have to be willing to dedicate a lot of hours to this business. And you have to have an extremely good, not only taste ability, but taste memory to remember what things taste like that you may have tasted 10 years ago, but you can't taste anymore. And how do I recreate that? It's a lot more difficult than it sounds. A lot of it is strictly a lot of hard work.
Okay, I'm just jotting all that down. Dedication and long hours, taste memory. And of course, I mean, any endeavor that a person wants to reach towards needs crazy dedication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to add the word crazy there.
And I think the other thing I would add that I didn't add, you have to have a natural curiosity. You have to be wanting to push boundaries, try things that other people haven't tried, come up with ideas that the first time you tell it to somebody, they either laugh at you or tell you you're nuts. But the only way we're going to advance Canadian whiskey is trying different things. It's important.
It really is. It really is. And I think I feel like in one sense, Canadian whiskey has a little bit of a silver bullet in order to do things that can't be done anywhere else. We'll get into that a little bit later with everything, but let me just finalize my thoughts here about this Barrel Select. Now, compared to your typical, let's say, everyday Canadian whiskeys, where in Manitoba, probably the place you find those most of all would be wedding socials, wedding parties for people getting married. They rent a hall, they get a temporary liquor license, and rye is probably one of the three most common spirits: vodka, gin, rye, and maybe a rum. That's kind of how things roll with these wedding socials. And probably the rye is one of the first ones to run out. But typically these are very, very innocuous. Of course, you always get that little bit of a puff of rye spice. But for me, what I'm tasting here is something much more robust, and definitely in company with, let's say, the better Wisers and Gibson's 8-year-old Bold, for example, is also nice, but this is very much in that same company of these bolder Canadian whiskeys.
Well, the original intention of this blend, I know it's kind of sacrilege, but let's face it, most Canadian whiskey is drunk mixed, primarily with ginger ale or with Coke. That's where most Canadian whiskey ends up. We wanted to produce a product at the time that would be mixable in those normal occasions, but should someone desire, can also be sipped on straight.
Absolutely.
And still stands up.
Yeah.
And I truly believe to this day that we really achieved it with that particular blend, the Barrel Select.
I'm really in agreement. And in fact, I would say that the rye content here is a little bit higher than the other Canadian whiskey brands that I mentioned. Obviously, not as high as the 100% Alberta Premium, but definitely it's there. It's you feel it in the aftertaste. The finish here, I'm predominantly getting that nice astringent, bitey little bit of rye, which is nice.
Mm. You know, it is my go-to at home. It really is. Now,
for the people from out of town, for example, Greg over in France, is this 40 Creek product available for you there, 40 Creek Barrel Select? I want to know how prevalent it is. Having lived in South Korea for a good long while, I certainly didn't see 40 Creek very often, except for very small boutique shops or certain whiskey bars where a person either had lived in Canada or they had just gravitated towards the Canadian whiskey style. So it was a little hard to get in Korea, but I wonder what's available out in overseas in Europe, and of course it's available in US, I believe.
Yes.
But other than that, I would like to know how far the brand reaches, and maybe Bill, you can maybe answer that.
I definitely do. So, as you stated, we're in the U.S. We're in most states. Mexico, we're in most of the resorts, or at least we were pre-COVID. I don't know where we're at there now. And the only other market that we're in worldwide, believe it or not, is the Ukraine.
That's really interesting. In fact, I have Ukrainian blood, so that's really cool. But I wonder. So that must have been just a certain importer or your Campari company over there that thought, we should maybe get some 40 Creek over here.
So I'm kind of responsible for that one.
Oh.
We have a global company convention annually, or at least we did pre-COVID in Milan. And I happened to bring a bottle of 40 Creek Barrel Select with me. And the one evening I was sitting around in the hotel lobby talking to two gentlemen who I found out later were the leader of the Ukraine. And lo and behold, when I got back from Canada, we got an order from the Ukraine, and we've been shipping it there ever since.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Liquids to Lips does wonderful things.
Yes, it does. And when the product itself is either, as long as it meets expectations, it's got to at least meet it. And if it goes beyond, it's probably going to be an instant order. And I think hopefully that'll maybe push the brand into other markets as time passes. And you mentioned the year 2000 as when 40 Creek as a brand was launched?
So that's when the first two whiskeys in the 40 Creek lineup were launched. We launched Barrel Select, and we launched the original 3-grain at the same time. The original 3-grain was, shall we call it, a puff of smoke. It was off the market pretty quickly.
Wow. Interesting. And was there a big difference in style between the former distillery, the former Inception, and I guess I'll just throw out the name since you did the John Hall style?
Yeah. Prior to John Hall arriving, and actually even with John Hall up until we launched the 40 Creek line, our brand of whiskey was called Canadian Company. And where we sold the most of it was actually in Taiwan. Taiwan was about 5 times the market of Canada.
Insane.
So it did have shocking. A different taste profile.
And I think, again, it's very much, I would say the style of drinking is very similar in, let's say, Northeast Asia. Highballs are really popular, and mixing with things like green tea and whatnot. So certain types of whiskey will work well with that. And I can see, it makes sense to me. And I know that certain Canadian whiskey brands seem to have been launched in Taiwan, like the Canadian Rockies brand, I believe, was launched there first before it was ever available in Canada.
It's an excellent market. It does take an awful lot of attention to the market, but it's a fantastic market.
Now, I'm just checking for questions. So for the people that are following along here live, just make sure you throw up at WhiskyWhistle so that I get a little bit of a flag that you've asked a question, and then I'll pose that to Bill as we carry on. Now, I've prepared a bunch of questions, Bill, and we'll get into those. And I think I want to pour the copper pot, which again, I've gone through 2 bottles myself, and my father stole one of those, and it was gone in in like just a matter of a couple or 3 weeks. So really interesting how I think I don't know. I think copper pots really do something that makes a whiskey much more sippable, enjoyable, etc., smoother in some way. But how much of an impact did Copper Pot Reserve have to your brand?
Copper Pot has been a kind of slow build for the company. It's one of those whiskeys that people discover and they really enjoy it.
And I'll say that it's also quite nice that it's 43%. I think that was the thing that's sealed the deal for me when I was looking for a nice Canadian whiskey to have on hand. Was the fact that it was 43% and the fact that obviously there's a lot of copper pot whiskey involved here. If it's not 100%, I'm not sure.
It's not 100% copper pot. What a copper pot does, whenever you do any kind of fermentation, you develop sulfur compounds. Copper literally converts those sulfur compounds into non-distillable salts. So it removes all of those sulfur compounds out of the liquid. In fact, when you use a column still, you usually have a packing that is copper wire or copper wool in order to absorb some of those. But it doesn't do quite the same thing that a copper pot does.
Makes sense. So around what percentage of copper pot distillate would this be?
So unfortunately, in my role, I don't disclose formulas.
Well, I would say, I'm going to guess that it's more than half. You can blink or wink, or you can just keep a straight face. But let's say a good portion is, of course, coming from the copper pot stills, which is great. Now, we do have a question from actually, I believe, a colleague of yours, and that's Chris Thompson. Welcome. And he says to ask Bill about the tea whiskey that you did. I'm really curious about this.
So Chris would bring that up. We did a product called Dionysus Tea Whiskey. And we actually we had a joint venture with a company in Yinchuan, China.
Wow.
Yeah, so just below Mongolia.
Is my spelling right here? DionYsis.
That sounds right.
Dionysus Tea Whiskey.
So,
and that totally makes sense because again, the tea mixing with tea is just so big over there. So that sounds pretty interesting. What sort of tea was it? Was it like the that smoky tea? What's it called?
So
again?
It was a green tea, and it had dragon something in the name.
Okay.
Trying to remember the full. The funniest part of that was, though, they sent us bales of tea in cardboard boxes. Packed inside each of these bales was this brick of white powder. Guess what Canada Customs did?
I can imagine.
Yeah, that was a very interesting product. We sold a significant amount of it. Very interesting taste. There was a little bit of a product development kind of quandary because the tea that they sent us had a high iron content, and iron is the enemy of whiskey. It produces all kinds of interesting precipitates and flocculation and all kinds of weird and wonderful things happen when whiskey contacts iron.
Now, I gather, did any of that make it to Canada, or was that strictly for the Chinese market?
So it was strictly for the Chinese market, but we did end up selling it in our brand house here on site in Grimsby.
Wow.
And in fact, I think there were tears in some people's eyes, including Chris's, when we sold the last bottle.
And a funny quip from Go Habs. He says that maybe those bricks of white powder were exported from Colombia, which is quite funny. Yeah, good stuff. All right, so that's really interesting. So anyway, 43% ABV. It seems like it's really just the big brother of the Barrel Select. So the Barrel Select, and I think price point
slightly higher.
Yeah. So I think this is about $30 plus tax in Manitoba, and the copper pot is, I believe, 39 or thereabouts. Or anyway, something like that. Anyway, whatever. It's just a little bit more.
Right.
I should pull up those price points. But anyway.
So the idea behind the copper pot was actually to make something that would stand up into cocktails a little bit more. The side part, or the good spin on it, was it ended up being a very good sipping whiskey as well. But it was to develop a whiskey that had a little bit more to it, so it stood up in Manhattans and things like that a little bit better.
And it really does have the right oomph to it. Even if you were to put this in a highball, you'll still know that you've got a Canadian whiskey, and you might even be able to tell that it's a 40 Creek whiskey within just a classic highball versus another brand. So quite a good strength to it. Now Greg is asking whether we might see 40 Creek in France someday.
So just to let you in on a little bit of secret, which I was going to mention in one of these questions at some point, next year we are undergoing a whole repackage of the entire 40 Creek line. We're going through a whole brand visual identity redo. The whole intention is to open up export markets, to keep our Canadian market, to keep our US markets, but open it up to more markets. So we definitely are going to be expanding into other markets around the world. Whether France will be one of the first or one of the last, that I can't tell you.
Well, that sounds great. Greg, hopefully that answers your question. And we already talked a little bit about the brand history, the distillery history as well. And so for the young whiskey fans that are getting into whiskey, and you're watching this stream, whether it's live or after the fact, you might have seen 40 Creek on the shelf since you were little, going to the LCBO or the liquor shops with your mother or father. However, it's really only been, I guess, about 21 years since the brand has launched, and I think so for young people it's been around forever, but quite a young brand. And I want to say a really big ramp up to what I guess, which is really hard to figure out without all the data, but what I guess would be somewhere around fourth or fifth biggest selling Canadian whiskey in Canada, I gather.
Yeah, that's about right where it lends up. Some months it's fourth, some months it's fifth.
There we go.
Hover right in that position.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, another question before I get into the next whiskey, which is again a new one for me, and that's the Double Barrel Reserve. So we'll try that next. But my question for you, while I get that poured, is in the brew house / still house / barrel filling station, disgorging stations, what separates 40 Creek from other traditional Canadian whiskeys, Canadian distilleries, Canadian whiskey distilleries, pardon me?
Sure. So we still maintain a lot of the hallmarks of a craft distillery. We still do a lot of things by hand. You know, there's a real person hooking up a hose. The barrels are emptied with a downpipe with a person moving it from barrel to barrel. When they're filled with a manual fill valve. So I would say what separates us is we're still very much a craft distillery, just bigger.
which I think is a big turn on for young whiskey lovers. Knowing that something is largely done by hand. I mean, of course, it's really hard to. I mean, there are some automated distilleries out there. Of course, you could say there's somebody operating it, but as far as all of the ins and outs of it, and you say like the connecting of hoses and I'm guessing the movement of barrels probably happens with a pallet jack or whatever. But it's very hands-on, which I think is great for people to know that. And I'll just add a few more things from what I can see as a whiskey lover and as a Whiskytube content creator here on YouTube, is that the first thing I noticed, first of all, is I mean, of course, after you go up from the 40 creeks that are available around waist level, so you move up to about eye level, and you see the let's say the better bottles. They're often shaped like this, but typically the strength is, I want to say, 44% or better, and there's lots of unique stories. So each whiskey has a particular story, like the Confederation Oak, which I don't have a bottle of right now. What's the one I bought last year now?
So last year's limited release was the Resolve.
Resolve, yes, the Resolve with the starboard
wine, yep,
fortified wine, which I thought was quite nice. I do have some left. It's probably around. I don't think I'll be able to find it for today, but that was quite nice. But these are all higher strength, and the price points, of course, are higher, but they're not that high. About $70 to $80 is about the price point of those better 40 creeks. So it's really attractive that you have these different varieties and these yearly releases that come out. And then this year, I mean, this year seems like it's been quite an explosion for 40 Creek. We have the Master's Cut, which is a cask strength whiskey. So that came out just I want to say weeks ago. The Foxheart also, it's been, I want to say it's been on the shelves here in Manitoba for less than 2 months for sure.
That would be about right.
Mm-hmm. And then you have Tap Room, which is available in Ontario. I was thinking of driving to Kenora, Ontario yesterday to try to grab a bottle of it, but they don't have any stock there. So that didn't work out. I wanted to surprise you with a bottle of that on my show, but another time. So anyways, lots of big things happening with 40 Creek this year.
Yeah, you're missing actually a couple. The Forager Botanical Whiskey was launched this year.
Yeah.
The other one,
the branding is, I don't think 40 Creek is very prominent on the label. It isn't. Which is probably why I didn't mention it. But now that you say it, I remember that it's made by you. So that's really interesting. Yeah. How has that taken off?
It has been, we have a lot of really loyal fans towards the product. It's been a very slow burn, probably because we didn't predominantly focus on 40 Creek on the label.
Yeah.
But it's a steady seller, and the people who enjoy it really enjoy it. And the last one I wanted to mention that we launched last year, which caught us all by surprise, and I know it's outside the realm of most whiskey tastings, was the Nanaimo Bar Cream Liqueur, which...
Right. Another one I wanted to get.
It actually was the most successful launch we've ever done in the history of the company. And when you figure that was done in the middle of COVID, it's hard to believe the sheer volume that achieved.
Incredible. And I think... I'm sure that every other Canadian whiskey brand, and probably, any other brand making liqueur type of, or cream liqueur type of spirits, Irish whiskey sort of thing, they're all probably punching themselves for not thinking of the Nanaimo Bar first, because that is just so Canadian. And everybody, I think, as far as I know, everybody loves Nanaimo Bar. So it's just such a no-brainer to take those flavors and create something with that. So well done with that. Good job.
Yeah. Once somebody does it, it's always a really, why didn't I think of that?
Funny. We got a question from Sasha Oswald, and he wants to know if all of your whiskey is matured on site in Grimsby, or if there is any maturation off-site.
So we, for a number of reasons, we do a significant amount of maturation off-site. The biggest reason for that is disaster proofing, shall we call it?
Mm-hmm.
If any of you are interested, look up on YouTube. There's a YouTube video of the Heaven Hill Bardstown fire, and you can see how disastrous distillery fires can be. So you really want to have your whiskey stocks, which are the lifeblood of the company, split up into different locations. Totally. So we definitely have different locations.
Yeah. And are those all peppered around in Southern Ontario?
They're all in Southern Ontario.
Yeah. Okay, exciting. And just saying a quick hello to everybody who's joined in the last little while. Thanks for coming in, Watchman999, and also Go Habs. I know I mentioned you already, but thanks for coming in and checking out this live stream with us. So this double barrel is quite interesting, and I want to say it's a ramping up of toffee and nut flavors, which I'm really enjoying. And what are the two barrels that we have involved here?
So the initial aging is done in regular white oak barrels, primarily experienced Canadian oak barrels.
Mm-hmm.
We do a minimum of 4 year actually for that particular product. Then we blend the whiskeys together, and then we re-age or do a secondary aging in once used bourbon barrels.
Excellent.
Now,
excellent.
The trick with the once used bourbon barrels is everyone always asks, well, how long do you leave it in the once used bourbon barrels? My answer is always a little bit fuzzy. It depends. So these products take regular tasting, because when they're ready, you remove them. I have seen it take as little as 8 or 9 months. I've seen it take 2 years. It all depends on those once used bourbon barrels, because even those barrels are mass produced, there's different levels of porosity in the wood, etc. So they react different to the whiskeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think now, so I gather you're talking, I mean, from the lingo that I've learned, so it's been used as bourbon once and then nothing else. Is that correct? Or
that is absolutely correct.
All right. So the first fill ex-bourbon barrels, I mean, I think especially if you're getting those from different sources, you have your typical straight bourbon whiskeys, which are typically 4 years old, unless they age stated less than that. But whether it's Evan Williams or whether it's Jim Beam, those are all going to be 4 years old. What's the one with the buffalo on it? Buffalo Trace. So those are all 4 years old. And but then there's a whole pile of other whiskeys that are aged for less than that. It could be just bourbon, not straight bourbon, but just bourbon, which could be anywhere from a couple of months to 18, 19, 20, 21 months old, which means the oak is extremely, extremely active. So it makes sense that you're gonna have to go by case, and I guess you got to check all those barrels. So who's checking all those barrels? That's got to be a huge job.
That would be me.
Oh my God. And are you filling about 5 or 10 barrels a day?
So we fill by lots,
Mm.
and we're not filling necessarily every day.
Mm-hmm.
A typical lot size is 120 barrels,
Yep.
and that can be done in a day.
Wow. Incredible. So it sounds like you're prepared to step on the gas if it's time to speed things up a little bit.
We have to be. And one of the most important things that a lot of people forget about this industry, science only goes so far. And what I mean by science is chemical testing, whether it be wet chemistry, whether it be GCs or HPLCs. They'll tell you part of the story. But what tells you the final story is somebody physically tasting the liquid. And that's where our final decision is made on everything, is the actual taste. We do have a tasting panel, but they will tell you I'm a bit of a bully, and I like to taste everything that gets blended and is planning on leaving this facility. So wherever possible, I do that.
Great. So Bill, if I'm ever out in Grimsby, Ontario, do you think I can just come and shadow you for a day?
I don't know whether you'd want to. How do you feel about starting at 5 a.m.?
I would do it because I love whiskey that much.
Because that's my normal tasting day. The heavy tastings are between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m.
Wow. Yeah, that's really impressive. Okay, so anyway, very nice change up, and it's interesting. We're going from 43% with a copper pot reserve to 40% with the double barrel, I believe. Yep. And I really don't notice a change in intensity of flavor. So that tells me that 40% totally works for this product. So a lot of people are I want to say a lot of new whiskey nuts, new whiskey fans, new whiskey freaks is a word I like to use. I'm a whiskey freak, but new whiskey freaks like to quickly develop this set of parameters. It's got to be 46%, and it has to have an age statement, and it's got to have information about casking on the label and all this stuff. And I get where they're coming from, but I think especially when you're looking at let's say your everyday price products, that it's really, you've got to really approach it for its price point, but also for the intended use of it, and also that you don't know how that whiskey is going to taste in the glass. And I've had some whiskeys that at 40% almost tasted too strong, and I wanted to add water to it because it was just too intense. So this is right about right for me. I quite like that.
Yeah, whiskey to me is all about experimentation, and you shouldn't set up boundaries for yourself. You're going to miss out on a whole bunch of really interesting whiskeys from around the world if you say, I'm not going to taste any whiskey that's below 45% or 46%.
Right, yeah.
I'm not going to taste a whiskey from Canada because I don't like Canadian whiskeys. I'm not going to try a whiskey from India. Just don't set up any boundaries for yourself. There's a whole world out there of really interesting products.
Oh, and just as an aside here, Bill, when you're not working and tasting 40 Creek and trying to figure out the next hit, what kind of whiskey or other spirits or etc. do you like to enjoy when you're having a bit of downtime?
So during most of the year, whiskey is my go-to. I do have a soft spot for whiskeys that are produced at 40 Creek, but I love some of the smaller Irish distilleries, some of their products. Some of the products that are coming out of Japan, the true Japanese whiskeys, are just amazing. And a lot of people don't realize that most Japanese whiskeys are actually produced with a different technique than we use in the Western world. So you can find all kinds of different expressions and things that really resonate with you. And I think whiskey should be about your own personal taste. What I like,
Absolutely.
You may hate. And that's the way it is. I like big, peaty, smoky Scotch whiskeys. Whereas for most people, those are like, ooh, I'm not touching that.
Definitely, I find my father's generation is not really into that at all.
Mm-hmm.
We have some people in our Winnipeg Whiskey Club who never before were interested in smoky, peaty Scotch whiskeys, but having tried enough of them, they found, okay, there are some that I like, and it's not just a single kind of a profile, but it's just so various, so varied. And I feel like anything, there's a Canadian whiskey for everybody. There's a peaty Scotch whiskey for everybody out there. There's a bourbon for everybody, and I think it's really fun to just share with friends, and it's more economical. You go and try what they have, they come and try what you have, and that's the best way to go about figuring out your tastes, and also maybe checking out people such as Bill Ashburn when they come to town for a tasting. If you can get involved with that or jump into a whiskey club, you're going to find a whole new world of things that you never thought you liked, which I think is great. Some nice comments from Greg. He says, for no prejudices, like Bill says, I recommend to pour them into blind tastings. Yes, blind is great, especially when there's a lot of aversion. So if people have a blended Scotch whiskey aversion, then I love to pour them some blind. And if they have a Canadian whiskey aversion, I'm going to stick some in a lineup of bourbons or whatever, and just I'll just sit back and watch as they tear down those weird preconceived ideas that they had, and who knows where they came from. But yeah, it's really funny. But anyway, so great. Okay, I want to get back into a couple of questions here, and then we'll get into the what should we try next, the Foxheart or the Master's Cut?
Let's try the Foxheart next.
Foxheart, okay. Get those. Actually, I think those can stay there.
If they'll balance.
They just balance, especially when I put them diagonally. There we go. Okay, that one is, there we go. Finding the empty glasses. So the Foxheart is a very interesting product. And since we're trying this next, we might jump to a question that I think everybody is, let's say, people who find out about this, they don't get it, and they have these weird ideas about this particular rule, the 9.09 rule, the 111 rule. And I believe this whiskey uses the 111 rule, does it not?
It does.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that people have a misconception about the 9.09 or
they
the
really do.
111 rule. And, that rule can be either good or bad for the whiskey. When that rule first came out, it was being used to add really cheap things to whiskey. The most famous of which was citrus wine, which is a very cheap product. And when you add it to whiskey, it reduces the cost of the liquid tremendously, but it also cheapens the taste, the flavor, the aroma. So the 9.09 rule used in that method to economize or stretch your whiskey, I view as bad. We do utilize the 9.09 rule, but the things that we're using in the 9.09 tend to be even more expensive than the base whiskeys that we're adding them to. They're there to enhance, They're there to top note. and they're in no means there to economize the whiskey. And I think that's the proper use of the 9.09 rule.
I totally agree. And just so that people are aware here, so this Foxheart Canadian whiskey, and I'll just read the label for you, and you'll see how transparent it is on the label with telling consumers as to what's happened here with this whiskey. Premium whiskey infused with aged Caribbean rum. Okay, so so that's interesting. The fact that it's on the label as such, I think, is a great thing. The Resolve also was very transparent about having the that starboard fortified wine infused into the whiskey. And so here's the nice thing about Canadian whiskey is that legally this is whiskey. This is Canadian whiskey. It's legal, and that's the way the law has been written. And this is not it's not an astronomically priced product. It's pretty reasonably priced. I don't know if you can give me the ballpark price point for that. Again, I should have checked it up.
In Ontario, it's $49 or $44.95.
Okay, right, yeah. So I think it's about the same, about $40, $42, $44 in Manitoba, plus the provincial and GST taxes. But so as Bill said, you've got a Canadian whiskey which is follows all the rules for Canadian whiskey. In fact, Canadian whiskey, the way it's distilled, would be fulfill the whiskey laws for almost any country in the world, except no, in fact, all of them. It would fill every single requirement to be whiskey anywhere in the world. And then we have this unique law, this unique rule where we can add 1 barrel out of 11 of some other, specifically it has to be, I believe, 2 years old or older. So it's got to be a minimum of 2 years
spirits,
old.
If it's spirits, it must be aged a minimum of 2 years.
Yeah.
If it's wine, it does not have to meet that requirement.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Okay, so if it's a wine, it doesn't have to be 2 years old. But obviously, it'll have some barrel aging as a wine, would it not?
Typically, yes, it would.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a really unique product, and I think it's something that you're not gonna. It's a flavor you're not gonna find in whiskeys from anywhere else. But at the heart of this is still this really interesting. Again, I want to say slightly nutty toffee-like 40 Creek. So anyway, great job on this, Bill. Cheers to you.
Cheers. What I should add is this product is very polarizing. People either love it or they dislike it. In myself, there's notes here that I know I could not achieve with straight Canadian whiskey. And it's just a really interesting blend of two different aged spirits.
And it's quite dry. So the nose is quite sweet. The toffee, the nuttiness. The palate, however, is a lot drier than I would expect. But I mean, rums also run the gamut of flavors, and there's dry rums, there's sweet rums, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, that's a minimum 2-year-old rum, which
it's actually I can disclose this. It's a 12-year-old rum.
That's incredible. 12-year-old rum. That is, I mean, that would be in the top 10% of oldest rums that are available commercially.
Yeah, it's a very special rum, and it really brings something to the party. The other thing I'd like to point out, since you were mentioning alcohol strength, I think this one tastes well above its alcohol strength.
Oh, it really does. It really does. This is 40%, and my mouth is telling me it's more like 45. And if I give this to my Winnipeg Whiskey Club members blind, as Greg suggested, they'll all think that it's a minimum 43, 44, 45, possibly even some people will think of the dryness and say, oh, this has got to be 46 or 47%. So quite intense. And we have another interesting question from Vaz Vegas, who's joined. And Vaz, this is the first time I've seen you on the channel, so thanks for joining. And he's asking whether or not the 9.09 rule, the 111 rule, pertains to Canadian whiskeys with age statements.
Yes, it absolutely does. Yeah. Whatever you use in the 9.09 does not affect the age statement. So put another way, 91%, if you have an 8-year-old whiskey, 91% minimum of that is 8 years old.
Must be 8. And it could be 100. It very well could be 100.
Very well could be 100.
Yeah. And I think I think it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense for some age-stated whiskeys from certain Canadian distilleries and blenders to use the rule. And you know, I mean, it's up to 9%. It could be much less, and it could be part of the DNA style of that distillery.
Absolutely.
And that's always what they use. So it's like, okay, we add 1 barrel out of 100 is a VSOP cognac, and 1 barrel out of 100 is aged cachaça. Cachaça, is that the right how for the pronunciation?
That's pretty close. You've been to Brazil lately?
No, but so they might have a certain recipe that includes those things, and that might appear in all of their products, from the basic no age stated all the way up to their premium products. And then there's new distilleries that are making single malts who could use the rule. They might use the rule. I'm thinking that in the spirit of single malt, they probably don't. And if they did, they would probably want to disclose it, because just like Bill has said here, we've got 12-year-old Caribbean rum that's infused into the whiskey here. So that's something special. It's something unique. So if you're going to use that, it should be mentioned. And, on the topic of single malt made in Canada, there really isn't, there's no legal rule about the term single malt in Canada just yet. USA looks like they're about to get a legislation on the use of the term single malt. So, you always have to look at things from, you got to be a skeptic, but you also have to at least try things, right? So it's like, you can't shut the door on things just because you feel like, oh, it's Canadian whiskey, it's got apple juice added. There's no apple juice in Canadian whiskey. Otherwise, it would simply be liqueur, spirit product. It would have another name. It wouldn't be called whiskey. It'd be called something else.
So I'd like to add something about the art of blending, because it's what I do. The whole premise of blending whiskeys together is to take separate parts, blend them together in such a fashion that the resultant product is greater than the sum of the individual whiskeys. So you're taking individual whiskeys and enhancing them by mixing or blending with other whiskeys. Mm. That's what I do for a living. And there's nothing, I'm sure you have tasted some blended scotches that would put some single malts to shame.
100%. And just today in a Facebook group, I was reading about somebody saying that, Johnny Walker Gold and Blue is garbage. I'm like, these, it's like have you tried them? Have you
Open your mind.
Sat and tried them? Because I've had some Johnny Walker that's been better than comparably priced single malts. And I think for a few years there, Blue Label seemed to be quite priced quite high. But interestingly, the way the economy is going, you can get Macallan 18 for $500, or you can in the USA, you can go to Costco and grab a bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label for 140, and it's an exceptional product at that price. So it's I think people really just have to give things a try and don't rely on their memory of, oh, I was in college and I drank half a bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label and I'll never drink it again. It's like, well, that's a classic taste aversion. That doesn't really tell people about the product. It's telling people about you and your misuse, your disuse of alcohol. So anyway,
we all have an alcohol in our past that we'll never touch again.
We do. Okay, let's move along a little bit here. And by the way, loving this, and I love its dry, herbal, interesting mix of flavors here. Again, it's a big different take on 40 Creek than the first three. So quite a change.
Again, this one has become quite polarizing, which I'm okay with. Not always going to bring out things that meet everybody's taste expectations.
Right. And if you're going to chase popularity, I think you end up losing your following.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Now, just another couple of questions here, because I know we're already beyond the hour point, and I want to thank you, Bill, for your time today. That's a big chunk of your day that you're spending here with me. I wanted to talk a little bit about Campari, and a gentleman that's watching today asked who owns 40 Creek. So with the parent company Campari, have you noticed some positive changes in terms of markets, in terms of availability of casks, distribution, etc.? What's been the benefit for 40 Creek to align with a large, what can I say, whiskey liqueur conglomerate like Campari?
That's actually really easy to answer. So we've been part of Campari since June 2nd of 2014. And we had reached our kind of max without an influx of capital, both to upgrade bottling equipment, facilities, even just marketing muscle. Campari brought that to the table. I've written down some really good answers, and now I can't find them. But the reality is, we had kind of reached a plateau, and we needed dollars to come in to assist us in pushing up to that next plateau level, and that's what Campari brought to the table. What's been excellent is they have not interfered with the liquids at all. I mentioned before that Barrel Select is 21 years old and still is true to the original formula, still wins medals. There was no
impressive.
There was no coming in and saying, we got to take costs out of this liquid. It was, we recognize what we've bought. Keep doing your thing on the liquids. We're going to play around a bit with the packaging, and we're going to get the word out there of what wonderful products these are. So it's been a very positive experience with Campari.
That's really great. And it sounds a little bit to me like the relationship, for example, with LVMH and Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, minus the handbags, of course. But you know, that's really great when you have a parent company that's that basically just says, okay, keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to help with marketing. We're going to help with getting your product into different markets. We're going to help with staffing, etc. The products. Maybe you can buy grain at a lower price, which is fantastic. If so,
yes.
So there's all kinds of benefits there.
One of the huge things that a lot of people tend to forget. When we started this company, we were entrepreneurial. And the skill set that you have to start up a company, start the entrepreneurial launch of a company, are not the same skill set you need to maintain and manage it from whether it be from a financial perspective or an inventory perspective or anything of that nature. So it was the right time for Campari to come in and take over a lot of those things. Are you on to the Master's Cut?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Actually, I just added a little bit of water to the Foxheart because, again, I mentioned how intense the flavor is. And I think that's going to do some fun things for me, actually.
Yeah, the really cool thing about the Foxheart, too, if you can manage to leave it in a glass for 20 minutes or 30 minutes just sitting in the air, it's amazing how much that liquid evolves.
I'll do just that. I'm going to put it aside. And while let me just put that down since we've tasted the Foxheart, and we're going to move into the Master's Cut. So that'll go right. Well, I think it better stay there. Otherwise, I'm covering my face. Okay, so the Master's Cut. And before I pour that one, and we already have some a little bit of crescendo of interest now. So we've got Holdsworth who's saying they're excited to try the Master's Cut, and I hope that this little event here with myself and Bill does nothing but increases your interest in 40 Creek and the Master's Cut itself. But let me pick out a good question here. I think we won't have time for all of the questions that I prepared. Okay, well, here's a great question, and it really works out well with trying Master's Cut, and it's this. I mentioned I've always been attracted to the higher proofs of most 40 Creek whiskeys, and there's something I think really honest in a way about adding less proofing water. But again, I should caveat that and say that it really depends on the whiskey. Like we got the 40% double barrel here that is great at 40%. But anyway, so the higher strengths and adding less proofing water, what is the impetus behind that at 40 Creek? And I think you've always had an advantage for the whiskey lover by putting out higher strength whiskeys. And why is that? We didn't see high strength Crown Royal until about 8 years ago. Yeah,
we started putting out a few higher strength whiskeys. By higher strength, I mean above the 40% normal. Just to give more boldness, to give a little bit more heat to the product. Having said that, we tended to keep below at 43% or slightly below. We did put out a couple of the limited editions at 45%. But I have a personal aversion to, shall we call them, the alcohol wars with ever-increasing strengths. I can only tolerate so much alcohol myself before I burn out my nostrils and can't taste anything else. So the Master's Cut was kind of really interesting because we'd been pushing and pushing. There had been a number of our fans, a number of people within our own company pushing for a cask strength whiskey. So I had to sit and figure out a way I could do a cask strength whiskey that still wasn't over the top in alcohol strength, which is what we did. So it has a very, very interesting aroma. It does not taste high strength at all, or does not smell high strength at all.
It's actually really approachable, and the viewership should know that this is 48.5%. And so when you know that this is cask strength whiskey, and you know that it's 48%, then that tells me a lot about what's gone into this whiskey. and it tells me that there's been a lot of older casks involved here, because the only way that you take a cask strength in cask whiskey and come out at 48% is by age. So hopefully I'm right there. But when I'm smelling this, I'm getting some let's say older books, like library books, leather bound books coming through on the nose. It's got a classic older Canadian whiskey edge to it.
You almost get a ginger aroma.
Yes, ginger. There's ginger there. And whereas a lot of cask strength whiskeys you have to smell from about here, I can go a lot closer and really enjoy that. And it's not singeing my nostrils, as you said. So that's really interesting. So I don't know, Bill, what's the secret here? How can this be 48% in cask strength, 40.5% in cask strength?
So
I think a lot of people are wondering.
What if I told you that the actual entry strength into the barrels was actually 44.5? We did the distillation at 44.5.
That's I'm baffled. I'm surprised. I'm shocked. That's really different. And I know, for example, a lot of bourbon producers like to fill at lower strengths because they like the way that ages in cask, because you're getting a little bit more interaction with water and wood as opposed to alcohol and wood.
Absolutely. Both alcohol and water are solvents, but they dissolve or absorb different things from the wood. This was done as an experiment. This is one of those experiments that was 5 years in the making and actually turned out. It's a wonderful whiskey. It was aged in our warehouse in Grimsby, which we preferentially evaporate water in the Grimsby warehouse, so strength actually increases in the casks.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're saying you humidify the warehouse?
No, the warehouse is heated year round.
Okay. Yeah.
So water preferentially evaporates to alcohol. So the alcohol remains for the most part, and the water evaporates.
Got it. So one of the things that I'm tasting here, and you talked about taste memory, but I mean, obviously it's not 40 Creek, but I'm reminded of McGuinness Old Canada, an old bottle that I found in South
way
Korea.
Back.
Yes. So I found an old bottle in South Korea. It blew my mind. And I'm getting some really classic, let's say, yesteryear Canadian whiskey style from this potent but not overpowering cask strength whiskey.
Yeah, the intention with this was to hark back to some of the historical whiskeys. I think we succeeded. I think this is a fantastic product.
Leather. It's got leather. It's got the old book-esque kind of sense to it. The rye that takes on a much more icing sugar kind of creamier sort of a feeling to it on your tongue,
opposed to the very rough of a lot of ryes. Yeah.
Casking, I'm guessing, is, I don't know. I want to say that it's predominantly, your typical whiskey casks, a little bit of bourbon.
This was a mixture of once-used bourbon barrels, and experienced Canadian whiskey barrels.
And I think another thing that people aren't aware of is that there's such a big focus on first fill. So first fill bourbon, first fill sherry. These are so potent that they actually, you can't even tell what whiskey it is at a certain point. So in the past, and even like the great blenders today, which I'm tasting this and I'm thinking to myself that Bill, you are certainly a master of blending. Not only your title as a master blender, but you're actually a master at blending. Um, it's sometimes it's casks that have been used in the industry a few times, used in your distillery a few times, that they have some old content from a previous distillation, from a previous maturation, and and then if you can put your new whiskey into that cask, knowing that the content of that old cask was great, you're already at a subtle, I want to say like 5% advantage, because you're getting some of that that content coming into your new distillate.
Yeah. The one thing that a lot of people forget about new fills is the amount of tannins that are extracted out of the wood. And that can be very distracting to the taste of whiskey. When you age in a wooden barrel, you have a couple things going on. You've got what the whiskey is extracting from the wood, and if it's a new barrel, it's going to be all the wood tannins, etc. If it's an experienced barrel, you're absolutely right. It's going to be extracting ghosts of what was in there before. If it's a really well-used barrel, all you've got going on are the oxidative processes. So various components, fusel oils, other compounds, get oxidized by the exchange of oxygen with the atmosphere. Those are the pure flavors of Canadian whiskey. It's always nice to have some whiskeys that are aged in really old barrels, because then you know the true of what your whiskey is. It's not distracted by extracting older whiskeys out of the barrel. It's not distracted by the tannins.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's a good thing to have.
Yeah, excellent. And I want to let that sit for a little bit. I'll get back to the Foxheart as well with a little bit of time in the glass. And I think another question that people are interested in, because we're, I guess, at the tail end of the pandemic, is what were some of the big hardships for 40 Creek during the height, I should almost call it the nadir, the bottom, the worst part of the pandemic. What was the big issues that your distillery faced during that time?
So the biggest issue we faced was the increased demand. I'm serious. We're a small company. We feel we're all part of a family, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep our consumers and our customers happy. A lot of companies, the shelves that held their products were bare. We stepped in. We pivoted really quickly to the larger sizes, the 1.75s, the 1.14s, because that's what people were buying. So our biggest challenge was keeping up with the increased demand. Now, as COVID kind of slowly is going away for us, we're facing the same supply chain challenges that every other company is. You know, the lack of aluminum for caps, glass bottle capacity. Everything is now hitting, and a lot of people don't understand we're in almost a second wave of shortages. It's being very interesting. The other thing I should mention, right in the height of COVID, when we were trying to keep up with all this increased demand, we as a company, as Campari, we got hit by a ransomware attack. And it took all of our computer systems out for 2 months. So that's for intense. 2 months, we, in Canada, the Grimsby facility, we were the only facility in the Campari organization that did not miss a day of production, did not miss a day of shipments during the whole COVID and ransomware attack. We have a fantastic team here, both on the manufacturing side, on the sales side, on the marketing side, and everybody pulls together and it works.
I mean, I think so. That's really awesome that you have a great organization behind you to get through those hardships. I mean, obviously, the hardship of getting whiskey on shelves fast enough to keep up with demand. I mean, obviously, that's got a real nice silver lining. Of course, I think for some distilleries, something would break. Either you'd have to turn down orders, or you'd have to outsource bottling, for example, or something else to help with the demand. So hopefully you're able to handle that all in-house and
and
meet the demand. Great.
I should add, during the initial stages of the pandemic, we actually produced a significant amount of hand sanitizer.
Oh, wow.
Which we
well done.
Completely 100% donated. We did not charge a cent for any of it.
That's pretty fantastic. And I don't know about the 40 Creek hand sanitizer, but I can talk about the Shelter Point hand sanitizer. And every time I use it, I'm like, yeah, I can smell the corn. The corn from the mash is really interesting. And every time I smell it, I look at the label to reaffirm that it contains certain denaturing additives. So it's definitely not a consumable product. But I think it's much better to get hand sanitizer from a local distillery than from, your generic brands that have all of the scents and other stuff added that it just smells like chemical. It's much better to have something that's much more natural and locally produced.
We've all experienced using hand sanitizer in some stores or restaurants, and you go, I can't eat or touch anything now.
No. Yeah. Imagine having ribs with, lilac perfumed type of hand sanitizer. It just doesn't work.
No.
Okay, I'll get back into that. Master's Cut is doing some great things in glass, and I have to say, it's got a slight little bit of haze to it.
Okay.
In a good way, it's not as crystal clear as some of the other ones that I've had so far today. So it's got a little bit of something, and I even noticed in the bottle when I go like this, I get a little bit of a wisp of something happening there that tells me that maybe, I don't know, was it less?
It was very lightly filtered.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing, and when you leave it in the glass for a little bit, you get a lot more. Again, the rich toffee is there. I'm getting a little bit of something like a cafe mocha added in.
I pick up a lot of vanilla.
And it's about the right, for me anyway, it's the right combination of dryness and sweetness. The Fox Heart, I felt a little bit drier in a good way. But the Master's Cut definitely has a sweet edge for people that have a sweet tooth with whiskeys, but it's also got some nice complexity and astringency that I think works really well.
Yeah, there is a significant amount of spiciness on the aftertaste. I'm extremely proud of what really was a shot in the dark experiment.
I think, I mean, I don't know what's going on with this bottle on shelves, but from what I'm tasting here, I think it's going to be a big seller for you. And I hope it is already.
It already is.
Great. That's great. I know Manitoba drops it, I think, sometime around I don't know, the 7th or 8th or 9th of November. So you'll probably get some data from Manitoba. I should ask about the price point of the Master's Cut. About $80.
It's around in the $80, same as
Yeah.
our normal once a year limited release.
Right. Yeah.
It also goes into BC about the same time frame as Manitoba. Both are launching in November.
So I think that's going to be a pretty big seller for Manitoba. And I think if you're in the people who are watching, if you're in Winnipeg and you're interested, probably this will be in the Winnipeg Whiskey Club's gala event at the end of November. And that's a good segue, actually. I wanted to ask you, Bill, I don't know if you do a lot of traveling for events or if you're mainly focused on working at the distillery, but if there's an opportunity, whether it's for, you're coming in for the Winnipeg Whiskey Festival, let's say, but if so, it'd be really great if you could maybe stay an extra day and put on an event for the Winnipeg Whiskey Club, if that works for you.
I would absolutely love the opportunity. Probably not this year, but the intent is I will start to get out and about quite a bit more than I have in the past.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's. I think there's something magical that happens when people get to try the whiskeys together with the hands, the nose, and the palate that created the whiskeys. So that's something special for me here as well, spending some time with you. And I wonder, so you come out with all these hits this year. Is there anything else coming from 40 Creek that you can hint at? What's coming?
We are always working on new and interesting things. Some turn out, some don't. We do already have the 2022 limited release in the bag, shall we say.
Oh, wow. Incredible.
That's already developed. And we're working on a whole bunch of other whiskeys and whiskey products. Just innovation is what this company was built on. We got away from that for a few years. We let our competitors take over that innovation spot. We're back, and
Fantastic.
We're going to be innovating.
That's great. And I don't know if that's already an idea in your mind, but I have a feeling that the tap room whiskey that you created with, I forget the name of the brewery. It starts with a B, I think.
It's Bench Brewing.
So Bench, I think that's probably going to be hugely successful. And so I think, maybe there should be more tap room experiments.
We're already planning on something that we can take nationwide.
Oh.
Or there's two concepts. One is nationwide, one is regional. And when I mean regional, I don't mean Ontario. I mean regional across the country.
That sounds really exciting, because I'll tell you what'll happen is that people are going to want to collect all of them, because that's what whiskey freaks like myself do. When they like something, they want to have every single one of them.
I know my own personal preference is to develop something for the nation rather than for different regions, but we'll see which way wins. It's the reality is it's going to come down to what's right for the whiskey.
Right. Yeah. And I think maybe, maybe it makes sense to start with something that's nationally available. And then down the road, it'd be pretty easy to collaborate with other breweries all across Canada. So that could be really fun.
Yeah, it wouldn't break my heart to go visit a whole bunch of breweries across Canada.
If you need some guidance with Manitoba and the Winnipeg brewing scene, I love beer as well, and I love the local beer that Winnipeg produces and the local, what can I say, the nearby towns as well make some great things. So just let me know if you want some help there. One comment I want to make about this Foxheart now, with a little bit of water and a little bit of time in the glass, is that I'm getting a lot of fruit coming forward in the glass,
Right.
and it's a little bit like, since it's Halloween around the corner, it's a little bit like Pez. The Pez dispenser candies, the fruit flavored ones.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a little bit of Pez candies coming through.
We've stated candied fruit, so yeah, I can't disagree with you. And what I always detect in this liquid, which a lot of people don't, is I detect banana in this.
It's more, if it's banana, it's more like banana, the banana marshmallows. The candy.
Yeah, I absolutely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Very fresh yellow banana that's not quite brown and flecked yet. And the dryness that I spoke of with water and time in the glass, it's basically a fruit bomb with quite a bit of complexity, a mix of tropical and orchard fruits, and I'm really enjoying that. I think if people have purchased this and they're thinking to themselves, you bought your Foxheart and you're thinking, not quite my style. Well, just try that. Pour 2 glasses, add a little bit of water to one, and then leave them for half an hour, as Bill suggested. And I think that you're going to like it either with water or without, or both, and you'll have fun with that. I think that's great. And Bill, just before I let you go, I want to get back into the Master's Cut for a final little nosing and tasting. So this as well, with time in the glass, the sweetness, the sweet edge has ramped up a little bit. There's still some nice leathery sort of old whiskey tones there. That dry sort of library book note has kind of dropped somewhat.
You can say it, the mustiness.
Well, if it's mustiness, then it's mustiness that I like. For me, that's one thing I love about whiskey as it ages is these weird non-food kind of notes that you get from older whiskeys. And it's still really kapow on your palate.
It punches.
Yeah, it really does. I haven't added water to that. I think I want to. We have, by the way, Sasha Oswald mentioning that maybe some cask finishing with local Niagara wineries. I think that's probably something that might be fun to try.
All I'll say to that is we have all kinds of weird and wonderful experiments on the go.
That's great. And we have Richard Agnew, who's joined late in the game here. Richard, thanks for popping in. And, well, they're just talking amongst themselves about 40 Creek. And they're talking about Shelter Point and Two Brewers, which, again, those are great Canadian single malts to try. And that could be some other collaborations that might work. And with all of these malt distilleries and classic Canadian whiskey distilleries, maybe something of a collaboration, blended a 10 province blended Canadian whiskey could be really interesting.
That is an interesting idea.
Yeah. I know there's a distillery in New Brunswick that just released their first whiskey, which is called, I think it's called Moonshine Creek. But that could be fun. So with water, The dryness returns a little bit, but I'm expecting it'll be a little bit juicier on the palate with water.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it totally is. And maybe the word juicy has infected my mind, but a little bit of juicy fruit gum. Great flavor overall. And again, as I add water here, I'm noticing a little bit more of that slight flocking, which I mean, personally, I love that. And I think every whiskey lover that is coming from Scotch whiskey and even bourbon appreciates that unfiltered, less filtered style, which is great. And a final question for you, Bill: if people have their Fox Heart or their Master's Cut, have you discovered any great cocktails or mixers that these work especially well in?
So I have not done anything with Master's Cut with mixing. I'm a bit of with our limited releases, I'm kind of a bit of a purist with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have not done anything with Master's Cut. The interesting twist on Foxheart, and maybe it's psychological with me because of the 12-year-old rum in it, but try it in a daiquiri.
Wow.
It's amazing. You now got a kind of whiskey rum daiquiri. It's actually an amazing product.
I think I might like to try that. Yeah, that could really work. So that's a great recommendation. And I mean, I agree with you personally. I probably wouldn't want to mix this, but I already know how nicely 40 Creek works either just with club soda,
Right.
so a whiskey and soda, and together with my wife, we've discovered that if you like the bubbly line of sparkling, no sugar added beverages,
Sure.
the 40 Creek, that Resolve actually is just kick-ass with bubbly peach.
Wow.
And if you've got any of that at home, Bill, I'd love for you to try that and let me know your thoughts on bubbly peach.
I
Basically,
will try that.
yeah, an ounce and a half or even 2 ounces on a weekend of the Resolve together with ice and a bit of the bubbly peach, and pretty what can I say? It's a very addictive flavor, and in a blink of an eye, my wife also, she I think over about a week she had finished about half of the bottle of the Resolve. I'm like, I can't get that anymore. You got to stop. So
that is something I definitely will try.
great. Please do. Okay, well, I think it's about time to wrap things up. Bill, I don't know if you have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to mention before we wrap things up, but it's been a fantastic.
This was a great
event.
session, and I'm always interested in talking Canadian whiskey, talking about the company. In case anybody hasn't picked up on it, I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about the company I work for. And so are virtually everyone else who works here with me.
I think, and we love that. We love you for that. And I think I speak for everybody that's really, really thrilled with the direction of not only 40 Creek, but Canadian whiskey as a whole, is that we are all just pleased as punch. We're thrilled. We're beside ourselves in excitement watching for all of these amazing things that are to come. And I think we'll be watching very carefully with what comes out next. And I think a lot of the people here in Winnipeg will be making the trip to Kenora to grab that tap room if it's available. I know that I'm going to watch, and if it's there, I'm going to drive out one night and grab a bottle and just drive on back. I think that'll be something really fun. I love the fact that it's in a growler. That's really cool. But anyway, great time. And to everybody who's been watching today, thank you so much. And please extend your thanks in a comment for Bill Ashburn and for 40 Creek and for Campari, who all came together with me to put this together. It took a couple of readjustments of dates because I have a busy life with 3 young daughters, and so happy this finally worked. My kids are at my mom's house, and the house is nice and quiet. Great time to spend with Bill and all these fantastic whiskeys. Bill, a high five to you from where you are, and a big cheers again to you and everybody at 40 Creek. And we wish you all the best, and have a great lead up to Christmas and all that entails. And good luck. And I will come and see you and hang out with you at 5 o'clock in the morning to shout at you, to help you, and maybe get my nose in a few barrels if I could. That'd be really fun. Anyway.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bill, you're a gentleman. Let's do this again soon. And to everybody who watched, really awesome having you. We'll see you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.